I started noticing them in the margins, not in history books, and certainly not in academic journals, but in photographs. Old photographs, the kind with that sepia grain that makes everything feel both more real and less certain. Photographs of people, extraordinarily tall people, beings who simply shouldn't exist according to the comfortable narrative we've inherited about human physical limits and evolutionary constants. And then they were gone. Not gradually, not through some documented decline in average height or slow genetic drift we can trace through medical records. They simply stopped appearing somewhere around 1800, maybe 1850 at the latest. The photographic record shifts, the giants disappear, and the deeper I looked into this absence, the more it seemed to correspond with something else, the rapid disappearance of Tartaria itself. The correlations seem too precise to be coincidental. Let me be clear about what I'm seeing. These aren't circus performers. These aren't the occasional genetic outliers we still see today, people with giantism or acromegaly, documented and understood by modern medicine. These are individuals, frequently multiple individuals in the same photograph, who appear to be 7, 8, 9 feet tall, sometimes more. And they're photographed not as curiosities, but as normal members of society. They are standing with families, working on construction sites, wearing the clothes of soldiers, of farmers, of laborers. They appear integrated into daily life in ways that suggest complete normalcy for their era. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. A photograph from Siberia, circa 1870, shows 3 men standing beside a standard door frame. The door frame itself is 12 feet high. I measured it against the known dimensions of the building that still stands. 2 of the men are of normal height. The third has to duck slightly. He's wearing work clothes. He looks bored. This isn't a staged photograph celebrating an anomaly. It's a work crew. Another image, this one from the American frontier, dated 1883, shows a group of railroad workers, 7 men, 3 of whom tower over the others by what appears to be 3 feet or more. Again, work clothes, tired faces, the casual posture of people who are simply working, not performing, not displayed. The ordinariness of these images makes their content all the more extraordinary and disturbing to contemplate. And here's the strangest part. These photographs exist in relative abundance up until a certain point. Then they stop. Not slowly, not with declining frequency. They stop, as if a switch was flipped, as if the giants themselves were suddenly no longer there to photograph. This raises a simple but critical question. Where did they go? That's where the mudflood becomes impossible to ignore. We've documented the evidence of cities buried under meters of sediment, first floors converted to basements, streets razed, entire ground-level architecture submerged and forgotten. This global pattern of what appears to be a catastrophic burial event occurred sometime in the mid to late 1800s. The timing aligns almost perfectly with the disappearance of the giants from the photographic record. Not close, not approximately, almost perfectly. What if the mudflood wasn't just a geological event? What if it was a reset, a deliberate erasure of not just buildings and infrastructure, but of the people who understood them, the beings who could operate them, maintain them, and explain them? What if the physical burial of the old world coincided with the physical removal of its guardians? Look at what survives. We have the shells of Tartarian buildings, repurposed and renamed, their original functions obscured or forgotten. We have the basement windows and buried ground floors. We have huge doorways that now accommodate normal-sized humans, though they seem perpetually oversized, perpetually excessive for their supposed purpose. What we don't have are the operators, the maintainers, the guardians. The giants are gone, and with them went the operational knowledge of the civilization they protected. Consider the architecture again. not just its scale, but its purpose. These buildings weren't simply large, they were sophisticated in ways that seemed to exceed the supposed technological capacity of their era. Free energy systems utilizing atmospheric electricity, harmonic resonance chambers, advanced water and air circulation structures built with a precision that modern engineers struggle to explain, let alone replicate with the tools allegedly available in the 1800s. The technological sophistication seems deliberately designed for operators who could work at an enhanced physical scale. Giants standing 8, 9, 10 feet tall could reach components housed in ceilings that now seem merely decorative. They could manipulate mechanisms built into architectural features that we've reinterpreted as purely aesthetic. They could operate at a scale that made sense of buildings whose proportions now seem excessive, wasteful, and illogical. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The buildings weren't oversized for human use, they were perfectly sized for their intended operators. And when those operators disappeared, the buildings became museums of a technology we no longer access, beautiful shells housing systems we no longer understand. The official explanation collapses here, because if these beings existed, their sudden disappearance presents a crisis for conventional historical narratives. You can't simply lose an entire category of humanity without explanation, without records, without documentation of disease or conflict. Unless, of course, their disappearance was orchestrated. Unless someone decided they needed to be removed from history entirely. The mid to late 1800s weren't just a time of political upheaval or industrial revolution. They were a time of strange silences in the historical record. Hospital records that abruptly end, census data that becomes inconsistent or is lost entirely, whole years where certain types of documentation simply don't exist, not destroyed in fires or wars, just missing, as if they were never created in the first place or were systematically removed. The gaps in documentation appear too consistent and too deliberate to be explained by simple neglect or accident. And what documentation does survive often contradicts itself. Heights recorded in military records that seem impossibly tall. Medical anomalies that are noted once, then never mentioned again. Consider the photographs again, the ones that do exist. Many of them have been corrected in subsequent reprintings, the scale normalized, the tall individuals reduced to normal proportions through careful cropping or digital manipulation. I've tracked down original glass plates and compared them to published versions. The changes are undeniable. Someone has been actively working to make these images disappear, or at least to make them seem less anomalous, less impossible. How do you coordinate a global erasure of this magnitude? How do you convince, compel, or coerce entire societies into forgetting a whole category of human being? The Mudflood may provide part of the answer, a catastrophic event, whether natural or engineered, that literally buried the old world, forcing survivors to dig out, rebuild, and reorient. In the chaos of such a reset, memory becomes malleable. Official narratives can be written by whoever emerges with power and resources. If the giants were specifically targeted for removal, the Mudflood would provide the perfect cover. Blame their disappearance on the catastrophe, fold their absence into the general trauma of the reset, wait a generation or two for direct memory to fade, then simply deny they ever existed at all. Rewrite the textbooks, suppress the photographs, and wait for time to finish the erasure. What knowledge died with the giant? We're told we're living in an era of unprecedented technological advancement, but what if we're actually living in a dark age? What if the technology we've lost was actually superior to what we have now? What if we're mistaking our recovery from catastrophic loss for genuine progress forward? The buildings suggest as much. They're more durable than modern construction, more energy efficient, and more in harmony with natural systems. The giants knew they were the bridge between the old world and the new. They were the living connection to Tartarian knowledge, and when they were removed, the bridge burned behind them. We may be technological orphans struggling to rediscover what was once common knowledge to a vanished people. The giants are gone, the buildings remain hollow and repurposed, and we're left with fragments, photographs that seem impossible, architectural features that make no sense, doorways built for bodies that officially never existed. The official history tells us we're seeing things that aren't there, that we're pattern-seeking where no patterns exist. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And the absence, the vast echoing absence where the giants should be, that absence itself is evidence, a negative space in history, a hole shaped exactly like the truth we're not allowed to remember.